In the world of cinema, it isn't always glamorous for the villains that were actually being presented. Same goes for many TV shows out there. Characters like Ironmonger from Iron Man, Ronan the Accuser from Guardians of the Galaxy, Rahul Silva in Skyfall, or even Euron Greyjoy are some of the villains that come to mind when I think easily forgettable. But obviously it's kind of, counterintuitive when they're easily forgettable villains, but they come to the top of my mind when thinking about easy to forget villains. They all have the same flaw, which I can only put down to genuine personality. All of them lack this humanity to them that ends up putting them aside from the great villains that we've seen upon every single film set. The understanding from the viewer's perspective as to why their motives are there is actually what gives them genuine understanding as to why people would relate to them in any way. This is something that we definitely get for certain with someone like Tai Lung from Kung Fu Panda. From the moment that he's mentioned, he's coming across as menacing and to be feared. At the exact time of his escape, this is setting in, all the way up to his fight with the Furious Five on the bridge. Everything just screams cool with his character. Over the years though, due to Marvel, there is a massive love for characters that are being built up to be the big bad character. In a way right now, I think we're seeing a massive yearning for genuinely good single movie villains, as we're starting to see the cracks in what happens when you have a massive build up. Thanos, for everything that we love about him, he had one major flaw, which was the power vacuum, not just in the sense of the Marvel Universe, but literally in terms of people caring about the Marvel Universe. Who could end up taking his place? How long would it take for us to even find someone to replace him that will be on par with him? Yes, they're trying out a few things, but the main one that they're currently going with is Kang the Conqueror, but due to how long it's going to take to actually build up his character, it's going to take a while to try and get people back on board for this journey. We were never really shown much of Thanos' powers. He was simply just a background character that we didn't have this reason to be so fearful of his entry within the universe. However, it was built up perfectly. He was instigating everything to do with the MCU around the Infinity Stones, which ended up leading to the climax of Infinity War, which was actually giving us a genuine presentation of what he was capable of. Yes, Endgame was technically the climax. However, in my opinion, I think it's the inferior film. Take it or leave it with that take, but then again, I do think that it has left us with this massive power vacuum that someone needs to fill. But due to this, we now need to explore new characters from other franchises, because right now, the Marvel side of things is really slacking. However, there is actually some villains who are able to pull off the one movie villain really well. You've got characters like the Joker in The Dark Knight, Death within Puss in Boots, and as the title of this video would suggest, Tai Lung in Kung Fu Panda. However, just before I get a little bit more in depth with this video, if you guys like high quality content like this on movies, TV shows, and etc., make sure to sub to the channel and help grow it, and make sure to leave a like as well. That'll help just get the video out there to other people. And if you want to support even further, there is minimaldesigns.com, which is down below, designs with a Y, not an I, and that will have some wallets and wallpapers if you're interested. Anyway, let's jump back into the video. Kung Fu Panda released in 2008, which means at the time when I watched this film, I was only 6, and it was definitely a film that stayed with me for a very long time. More in particular, I just remember finding Tai Lung one of the coolest characters I had ever seen within any film. And obviously at the time, Jack Black was a bit more popular. I'd say he's definitely not as popular now, but he was very big back then, and the only film that I'd seen prior to this was The School of Rock, which, it's a decent film. However, it's aged very poorly, but it doesn't surprise me for a film that was made in 2003. He definitely plays the role of the fat, clumsy panda very well. The tale of Kung Fu Panda and who Po is as a character is something that I want to make a separate video on, so I'm going to hold off jumping massively into it, but he is definitely a factor that plays into the whole reason of Tai Lung's ignorance later on. Tai Lung, as he says within the film, believes that their battle will be legendary. However, in that moment when he finds out that he's just a panda, he ends up thinking that he's nothing more than a laughingstock, with no other reason behind it except his weight, and maybe his clumsiness as well, but primarily his weight. As Tai ends up viewing this as much more of a undeserving moment for him to become the Dragon Warrior, as he believed himself to be worthy of the title after training for so many years. And also the fact that Shifu had practically indoctrinated him into the belief of becoming the Dragon Warrior, there's all that as well. However, Tai Lung represents hard work and dedication to something that you believe is your destiny, and then falling into resentment and anger for not having it brought to you. He's understandably upset, which is why I think he turns out the way he does and why people love his character so much. But for a character that's literally on screen for less than 15 minutes, he ended up leaving a massive impact on many people. However, one thing that I've never been able to understand truly how they get it so wrong is that with characters like Tai Lung, he had less than 15 minutes. And then you have someone like Ironmonger from Iron Man 1, who had 20 minutes of screen time, and still feels massively forgettable. I do think that he was actually a good villain when it came to starting off the MCU, because it gave the idea of the one-to-one stakes that were being put on the table. However, obviously as time went on, I feel like he definitely faded more and more into the background as someone that nobody really cares about. When going back and watching Iron Man, I never really care about watching Obadiah. I just end up going back and rewatching it because I want to watch the intro into the MCU and Tony's story arc starting to take place. In the film, Obadiah Stane just ends up coming across as nothing more than a bitter old man who doesn't really want anything outside of the glory, but because his name isn't Stark, he also knows that will never happen. Like, sure, he has some reasoning as to why he's doing it, but it's never fully portrayed in an emotional context for his character, so it never really goes to fruition within this film to make him a genuinely great villain. Euron Greyjoy is another character that, even though Game of Thrones isn't a film, I think this still displays the same effects when it comes to the issue of personality. When we first meet him, he doesn't seem too bad of a villain. However, as all Game of Thrones characters go, all of them end up just kind of wanting to do whatever they want and don't really care what happens along the way. And due to him coming in later and never really being mentioned earlier on within the show or being given much of any backstory, made him miss that diabolical side that you got with a character like Ramsay Bolton or Joffrey. As in my mind, I do think Euron Greyjoy was them attempting to make another character similar to them, or at least bring him into the world, because obviously he exists within the books. However, it just wasn't done well. I think they needed to at least have built up a little bit of history or given him a bit more screen time to develop his character. He comes into it without much of any of this. With Joffrey, we ended up hating him because he has that extraordinarily vile side to him. However, all of this, we saw his trajectory. We end up seeing so much of the beginning of his character, of him going slowly more and more to being unleashed as the extreme spoiled brat persona that you eventually get. And for Ramsay Bolton, he originally just wanted to become something more than his father's bastard and ends up being everything that he wanted to be. However, he ends up doing everything possible to try and get him there, even to the point of becoming even some people's even more hated villain than someone like Joffrey. But Euron never really gets that much screen time to develop his character. With a character like Ramsay Bolton or Joffrey, they had so much more screen time to develop this, maniacal character that they just didn't get with Euron. And for those two, alongside many MCU villains, some DC villains, but it's very rare in those regards, and in general, many different just standard films, they give us a lot of characters who are meant to be really interesting antagonists, but sadly they end up fading into the darkness, and we only remember the likes of the Joker, Thanos, Jon Doe, Cersei Lannister, Darth Vader, and Walter White are the main forefront of villains in the movie industry. And in the animation world, DreamWorks is definitely the king at creating genuinely amazing villains. Tai Lung gets given levels of relatability. You understand where his anger, frustration all comes from, and you understand why he feels entitled for the role of Dragon Warrior. In Kung Fu Panda, you end up being given his character's actual backstory within moments, showing his childhood, showing him grow up and slowly descend into the darker character that he eventually becomes, and when he eventually tries to take the scroll. In every single scene that you see of him trying to escape from prison, it ends up making you question, can the Five even take him on? Or anyone for that matter, can they actually stop the machine of this snow leopard character? But above all else, he is given levels of relatability that not only make his motivations understandable, but you also feel a small little droplet of empathy for his character, having been taken away from what he thought was truly his destiny. Tai Lung for me is definitely one of the great movie villains that we've ever seen within the world of cinema, and definitely sits in the top 3 for the Western animation world. Anyway, with that all being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I just thought I'd make a video talking about Tai Lung briefly and kind of talk about this idea of one movie villains, as I do think they're kind of starting to make a comeback a bit more. People are no longer caring as much about the idea of having this, big bad built up. I think a mixture of things like, TV shows and MCU has really made that a big thing. However, I think a lot of people are kind of wanting to get those, one moment villains that are actually good. You can sprinkle in, the character that you're building up along the way. However, I do think this ends up leading to what you got with someone like Thanos, where there's that massive power vacuum of, okay, who replaces him? And not only a power vacuum within the world of the MCU, but also what people actually perceive as a good enough villain to take on Thanos' role. So yeah, with that all being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, do subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.